Hello and welcome to this installment of Vox Machina. As your narrator, I'll be bringing fantastic works of fiction from the page to your eardrums. Uploads will be posted weekly, so be sure to subscribe and hit the alerts bell to be notified when new installments are available. Got a story you think deserves the Vox Machina treatment? Let me know in a comment and you might just hear it in a future episode. Thanks for listening and on with the show. Every New Beginning by Fencer X. Episode 16. Harry made his way up to his room in the near-empty Gryffindor Tower. His bed and wardrobe were back where they belonged, if they'd ever been gone to begin with. He still couldn't tell how the room had managed that bit of magic, so Harry packed a small overnight bag, shrank his friend's gifts down to fit in his pocket, and set off for Hogsmeade. By the time he reached the Hogs Head, slowed down by the snow-crusted ground and ice-lit paths, Aberforth was up and about, enjoying a private breakfast all to himself in his little apartment on the second floor. He poked his head out the front window, glowering down at Harry, who waved up at him and wished him Happy Christmas, Ab. Yeah, same to you, Potter. Come on, come on. Aberforth waved his wand in Harry's general direction, and the door to the pub creaked open. Inside, quickly. Don't want anyone thinking I'm open for business. Harry was only too happy to duck inside out of the chill, and after spelling his shoes clean of the snowpack he'd tromped through, he scaled the steps to Aberforth's den. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth, and Ariana smiled down at Harry from her portrait with a polite little wave. He waved back, and Aberforth snorted softly from his spot at his little dunette. Christmas was always her favourite time of year. Aberforth had never struck Harry as one for idle conversation, so Harry indulged him. Was it? She liked decorating the tree, loved the pretty baubles and tinsel and fairy lights, turned Albus onto Christmas crackers even. Harry thought of Dumbledore's portrait proudly bearing the Santa hat. Kept her quiet and distracted, so Mother encouraged it. Our home was a sight around the solstice, it was. Harry cast his eye around Aberforth's den, noting the handsome little fur standing in the corner beside Aberforth's dusty, uncomfortable easy-chair. It was decked out far more elegantly than one might have expected of a man of Aberforth's means, and Harry smiled to himself. I'd like to have seen it. It's nothing compared to what you lot put on up at the castle each year. Aberforth took a swig from a mug of something Harry suspected was not coffee and waved to the fireplace. Flue powder's up on the mantel. Make sure you're back before noon tomorrow unless you want to wade through a bunch of louts trying to get extra drinking in after the one day off. Harry gave Aberforth a small salute, then made for the fireplace, suddenly eager to be surrounded by family and warmth and love, and feeling inexplicably guilty for it. He tossed a handful of Flue powder into the brightly burning flames, called out, "The Burrow!" and stepped through, and out into the middle of an argument. "You'd love it if you just gave it a chance," Ron was saying to a weary Hermione. "The cannons have really improved." Mate! Ron leapt on him with a fierce hug, and Hermione waited impatiently for her turn when he released Harry, ducking in for a quick squeeze of her own. "About time you showed up." "Molly's been a mess the past few days, evidently," Hermione said with a soft smile. "I got in just an hour ago myself and was promptly put on dusting duty. She wanted the place in tip-top condition when you arrived." "Well, you've done a fine job," Harry said, casting his eye around the room. The pictures and the frames had changed over the years, but otherwise the Weasleys' living room was much the same as it had always been. Harry found he was relieved by this bit of familiarity. "Happy Christmas!" "And to you," Hermione said, leaping her arm through his. "Come on, we're sure to catch hell from Molly if we don't present you straight away." "She wouldn't let us eat until you got here," Ron said. "So good thing you showed up when you did." Harry winced, knowing the hour was getting nearer to lunchtime now than breakfast, and Ron did not like missing meals if he could avoid it. "Forgot to set the wand. Timer charm didn't wake me up when I meant to," was his breezy excuse. If Ron and Hermione exchanged meaningful glances, suggesting they didn't buy it, Harry didn't see, for he was quickly enveloped in one of Molly Weasley's bone-crushing hugs as she drew him in. "Oh, Merry Christmas, Harry! It's been too long." "Only been a few months, hasn't it?" He would have been here for his birthday. At least he ought to have been, right? He was pretty sure he'd celebrated his 18th at the Weasleys' place. Even if it hadn't been the raucous affair it might have been, had it not come so soon on the heels of a war the family had paid for in blood. "I said what I said," Molly sniffed, shoving him away to hold him at arm's length. "I swear you get taller every time I see you. Haven't been spiking your pumpkin juice with a swelling solution, have you?" "Definitely not a swelling solution," Ron snickered under his breath, swiping a warm muffin from atop the mountain that Molly had just set on the table. Harry delivered and received his Christmas greetings from the rest of the family as they made their way in. Evidently, Bill and Fleur were last-minute Christmasing in France with Fleur's family this year, to Molly's overt displeasure, but Everyone else seemed to have squeezed into the Burrow for the holidays. Just as well you were only able to join us for the one evening, Harry, George said with a wry smile. You might have had to kip in the garden shed. Nonsense, Molly gasped, laying a hand on Harry's shoulder protectively. Don't listen to him, dear. We would have loved to have had you here the whole of the holidays. Why weren't you able to join Ron and Hermione riding back on the Hogwarts Express again? Harry started, glancing to his friends in panic, and Ron interrupted with an angry growl around the second muffin he'd shoved into his mouth that sounded something like, Mom, breakfast! Daylight's burning! Against all expectations, the breakfast table managed to fit all present Weasleys and their assorted significant others. There was a brief, sombre toast to Fred, who it was suggested would be sore to have missed the biannual denoming of the garden. At least he'll always hold the record for farthest horse, Ron recalled with a forced smile. Pretty sure he cheated to get that kind of air. After breakfast, to lighten up the atmosphere, it was decided they would exchange gifts, which suited Harry just fine. Ron was thrilled by his new copy of Snitches on Pitches, a pop-up Quidditch tactics book that included figures who rose off the page to demonstrate maneuvers, and Hermione was just as happy now as she'd been the first time around with Housecraft, a history, exploring the creation, adoption, and evolution of now common household spells. He tried very hard to act surprised with his own gifts of new Quidditch gloves, and Hermione's blushing admission, Ginny helped me pick them out, and a professional wand holster. Dad says this is the same brand as what the Aurors of the Ministry use, but he was pretty sure his friends saw through his ruse. Molly sent them outside to work up an appetite for lunch, and though they attempted a game of Quidditch, it became clear after a few goals that no one's heart was really in it, least of all George, now down a chasing partner, so they took turns instead denoming the garden, exploring Arthur's shed full of muggled bric-a-brac, and, for those with vocations at least, complaining about work. So, Hermione said as they picked their way through the garden on the lookout for bulbous heads poking about, how is Malfoy doing? And his father? He's all right. The both of them. What? Hermione straightened, a frown tugging at her lips. You mean to say he's still kicking around? Ron hissed, chucking a freshly caught gnome over the garden wall, where it disappeared with a waning whee! I thought you said he was supposed to, you know. Ron slid a finger over his throat. He was, Harry said, stepping closer to the two of them. But, I did meddle a bit in his life too, remember? Maybe it was enough to change things. Or maybe when Kingsley took him out of solitary, he put him in a different part of the prison where he wasn't meant to be, so whoever offed him in my time didn't get the chance. Honestly, any of a dozen things might have happened. Hermione bit her lip and Ron elbowed her gently. See? Tweaking the timeline didn't hurt. It even saved a life. Not a life I think needed saving, mine, but all the same. Did it? Or have we just not seen the consequences yet? Harry frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means what I said. It might be, I don't know, like a domino effect. Tottenham effect? Ron said. No, domino. Like this one change Harry's made, it might have saved Lucius's life, true, but we can't know what that might affect going forward. Perhaps now Lucius later gets out somehow and goes on to hurt someone. Someone who wouldn't have otherwise been hurt if Lucius had died how and when he was meant to. Harry's head started to ache, and he rubbed at it with a groan. We really have to talk about this on Christmas? I get where you're coming from, but still. Harry sighed. It was a good thing. For Malfoy, at least. He was really, really relieved. He was? Ron asked, looking rather dubious. Thought he didn't like his old man. Always seemed more scared of him than anything. Definitely a mummy's boy, that one. I guess it's complicated, Harry said with a shrug. He reflected that he probably shouldn't have mentioned how Malfoy had taken the news about his dad. It had seemed a very private thing at the time, and he felt like he'd betrayed some sort of confidence, sharing it with Ron and Hermione. Hey, so what were you arguing about when I came through the flue? Oh! Ron turned on Harry, bright eyes clearly eager for support. Get this! Hermione doesn't think Quidditch tickets count as a good Christmas present. You're with me, right? It's a perfect date spot. Harry said, recalling suddenly Ron's disastrous proposal to Hermione at a cannon's match not 2 years hence. It was a subject of good-natured ribbing now, but it had nearly prompted Hermione to turn him down, as he'd lost the ring after joining the crowd and leaping to their feet to celebrate Gudgeon actually catching the snitch, in lieu of slipping it on his fiancée's finger. For some? What's that supposed to mean? Ron asked, giving Harry a shrewd look. You know something we don't? I know lots of things you don't, mate. Harry clapped him on the shoulder. Let's chuck a few names in Fred's honour, shall we? After the garden had been cleared, with no gnomes harmed, thanks to discreetly cast levitation charms on Hermione's part, Molly cast a sonorous from the kitchen door, summoning them all to lunch. They feasted, napped, tried out a few of the more ambitious tricks in Ron's new book, helped Molly prep for dinner, and sat by the wireless in a postprandial stupor, listening to wizarding Christmas carols piping over the wireless. It was not the best Christmas Harry had ever had, he didn't think, but it had been remarkably more bearable than he recalled it being the first time around. Given the only tangible difference now was that he'd spent the better portion of it with Malfoy at Hogwarts, away from the oppressive sadness of a family still trying to put itself back together after an inexplicable tragedy, he supposed he shouldn't have been all that surprised. He'd had years to mourn Fred, to look at George and just see George and not half of the Weasley twins. And though it left a guilty pit in his stomach, he was not keen to join his friends in their return to loss and emptiness. It wouldn't be good for Harry or the Weasleys, really. He could still support them, though, and wrapping his arms around Ron on the one side of him and Hermione on the other, he squeezed, closed his eyes, and drifted off to the smooth warbling of Celestina Warbeck. "You really should stay," Ron wheedled over coffee the next morning. Hermione was rubbing an herbal lotion of some sort onto his neck and shoulders, as they'd all woken up with cricks after sleeping curled around each other on the couch. "It's only another week or so, right? And—" He dropped his voice, glancing round surreptitiously. Molly was humming carols to herself at the stovetop, Ginny at her side, and Percy was the only brother so far who'd roused, though he was presently nodding off over the morning's copy of the Daily Prophet in the living room. And Malfoy's dad's off the hook now, so no need to hang around babying him. "I don't baby him," Harry said. If he wasn't getting accused of coddling on one front, he was getting it on the other. "I told you I wanted to be there to support him. Make sure he didn't backslide in case his dad, you know." Ron helpfully mimed slicing his throat again. "Yeah, that." "And he hasn't, so—" Ron gestured to the table. "Stay." The thing was, Harry could. He could easily send an owl of Patronus to McGonagall and tell her he'd decided to spend the rest of his holidays with the Weasleys and would be back at the beginning of the term on the Hogwarts Express with his classmates. There was absolutely nothing stopping him from doing so. Except himself. Because even now he was, well, he didn't know how to describe it. Anxious, almost. Nervous, not because he thought there was anything nefarious happening up at the school. Oh, Peeves might be giving Filch a hard time, naturally, but that would be the extent of any mischief being made inside the castle. Harry simply hadn't spent this long away from the room, away from Malfoy, since he'd taken up the noble cause of writing Malfoy's future, and while he was hardly labouring under the delusion that 24 hours away would undo all of his hard work, he did have a measure of faith in Malfoy to stay out of trouble for at least a day. It still nagged at him, a siren call summoning him back. He knew if he tried to explain it to Ron and Hermione, they wouldn't understand. Or worse, they might understand. But he'd always hoped they would support him. He could feel Ron's confusion growing, though, and his patience thinning. Hermione, too, was now terribly interested in her own coffee mug, taking delicate sips and avoiding Harry's eye as he looked to her for help diffusing the situation. He ran a hand through his hair, ruffling it. It was going to look like shit once he got back to the castle, but as Malfoy had said, it always looked like shit. "You know I would, mate, but—" "But you can't," Ron muttered, tapping his wand against his mug as it refilled itself with fresh coffee. The curling tendrils of steam obscured his face, but Harry knew he was still giving Harry a long, unhappy look. "He doesn't deserve it, you know." "Ron," Hermione chided softly. "Well, he doesn't. And you agree with me." Hermione flushed, pursing her lips. "That's not what I said. I said—" She swallowed her words, guilt in her eyes. "I said he'd probably just squander whatever second chance Harry was trying to give him. But it's not the same as saying he doesn't deserve it." Harry blinked slowly at the both of them, processing their arguments. "You think I'm wasting my time with him?" "No," Hermione said as Ron nodded. "Exactly. He gets it now." Harry sat back in his chair, drumming his fingers over the table. He could hear, in the stories above, the rustling and creaking of the rest of the family finally rousing as the tantalizing scent of Molly's breakfast spread began to waft their way. He didn't want to leave on poor terms with Ron and Hermione, but he needed them to see what he was doing was worth it to Harry, even if to no one else. The thing is right now for me, for this version of me, he's the only thing that matters. The only thing worth spending any of my time on. And I get that you don't understand that, or that you don't agree, but he is quite literally the very reason I exist here. He took a breath, locking eyes with the both of them in turn. I know I haven't been a very good friend to either of you these past few months, and that's on me. It really is. I've gotten used to working things out on my own, seeing as we're all adults with our own lives and problems that only rarely intersect now. So I've maybe forgotten what it means to lean on you and have you support me no matter how insane whatever I'm attempting may be. But don't. He cut himself off lest he raise his voice and consciously tempered his tone. Don't tell me I'm wasting my time, or that he doesn't deserve it, or that it's going to blow up in my face. You wouldn't say those things. You wouldn't feel that way if you'd seen the future I've seen for him. If you'd stood there 2 feet from him and watched him. He cut himself off again, this time because it wasn't his story to tell. Just let me do this, please. Let me see it through. Let me be Harry Potter. I'm pretty good at it. Molly swaned in, carrying a platter nearly half the size of the entire table, piled high with piping hot pancakes. Ron, be a dear and summon the syrup, would you? Ron reached for his wand, expression torn. It's not you being you we're worried about, mate. It's him being him. After breakfast, Harry delivered his goodbyes to the rest of the Weasleys first, promising with no conviction he'd be back to visit after school ended. With any luck, he'd have Malfoy sorted well before then and be back in his proper timeline, raising hell. He wrapped up the visit with long, tight hugs for Ron and Hermione. I'll see you back at school, yeah? Yeah, of course, Hermione said, a bit breathy. We've missed you, you know. It's not the same spending the holidays apart. I know, Harry said, suddenly apologetic. He was ruining what little holiday time they had to spend together. He dropped his voice. I did mean it before. I'm sorry about not being around, about being preoccupied. You've always been preoccupied with Malfoy, Ron said with a wry kind of leer. This is a whole other level. Harry had to give him that. But he is worth it. I know you don't see it, but it matters that things turn out different for him this time. Tottenham effect, Ron said, and Harry snorted, nodding. He wasn't wrong, after all. Yeah, we'll call it that. I'll take your word for it. When he flew back to the Hogs Head, Aberforth was sitting in his easy chair by the fire. He raised a cup of coffee to Harry and mock toast. Morning, Potter. Morning, Ab. Thanks for letting me use your flue. Just don't make a habit of it, he grumbled, though he had that familiar Dumbledore twinkle in his eye that said he could be pretty easily convinced to do so again if pressed. I'll try not to, Harry said, and with a grateful little salute he slipped down the stairs and out onto High Street, marching double time for the castle. He made for Gryffindor Tower first to drop off his overnight bag and the gifts from his friends, and found a box waiting for him on his bed. It was nondescript, wrapped in green and red foiled paper and tied with a gold ribbon. There was no tag to mark its sender, but Harry had an inkling, one that was confirmed when he tore away the paper and lifted the lid of the box to reveal a big flashy badge with "Proud Member of Harry" emblazoned on the face. Under it, tucked into the tissue paper lining the box, was a note written on heavily embossed cardstock that said, in a script so fancy he could barely make it out, I do revile him. Harry grinned to himself as he fastened the badge to his shirt, marching down to the common room with his head held high. One of the second-year students, God, had he been so weedy himself at that age, who'd stayed on for the holidays, poked his head up from one of the reading couches, giving Harry a nervous wave as he walked past. He frowned in bemusement when he saw Harry's badge, a hesitant smile ticking at his lips. What's Harry? Immediately, a tinny little ditty began playing, and the second year recoiled in confusion, clutching his transfiguration text to his chest as a shield. Is it meant to do that? Oh, I expect so, Harry said, already humming the tune to himself, earworm that it was. It was a fantastically complicated piece of charm work. Too complicated, in fact, to have been accomplished with the hamstrung ministry-issued wand. Now, wasn't Malfoy glad Harry hadn't shoved that wand up his arse like he'd told him to day one? He didn't bother checking the map. Where else was Malfoy going to be, really? He asked the badge, What's Harry? 3 more times on his way to the room of requirement, until he had its ditty memorized and wondered if there were lyrics to go along with it. Probably there were. Possibly they were dirty. Definitely they were potshots at Harry. He was still humming it when he strode into the room, the badge proudly brandished. Malfoy was curled up in Harry's armchair, an oversized mug of something warm at his elbow, reading the book on wandless magic Harry had gifted him for Christmas. "I like my theme song," Harry said, conjuring up Malfoy's atrocious acid-green divan and flopping down. "Did you miss me?" "It's not your theme song," Malfoy said, taking a calm sip from his mug and turning the page slowly. "It's the Harry official anthem. And don't flatter yourself, I was thrilled at the privacy you fucking off afforded me." He snapped the book shut and placed the mug on a side table. "For 24 glorious hours I was able to return to a moment when my life had not been invaded by time-hopping auras with saviour complexes." Harry draped himself over the arm of the divan, grinning. "You missed me. You were bored out of your skull." "I did not. I was not." "Did you write to your dad? Or to your mum? Did she send you anything for Christmas?" He glanced around the room, though he supposed any gifts would probably be safely tucked away in Malfoy's dormitory down in the dungeons. "I did. She did. But—" Malfoy gave him a hard, wary look. "What's with the interrogation?" "What interrogation?" "This interrogation. You're being chatty and inquisitive. It's very off-putting. Stop it." "I'm not interrogating you. I'm catching up. You can ask me questions if you want." "I don't." "Because you don't want to sound chatty?" "Because I don't care." "Well, I do care," Harry said. "So?" Malfoy sighed, throwing his head back. "I received an automated ministry response affirming their receipt of my letter for prisoner Malfoy, and that was that. Mother informed me that my correspondence had been lacking of late and that she would be expecting more regular messages in the new year." "That's it?" Harry frowned. "Not even a happy Christmas?" "It was written on very festive stationery," was his explanation. He then snapped his fingers, and a polished silver cloche Harry hadn't noticed before it was zipped into his hand. Malfoy carefully removed the lid, revealing a chocolate box in the shape of a peacock, its plumage made of what looked to be pulled sugar and the eyes on its tail dotted with chocolate confections. And, of course... "Of course?" "Well, she sends me sweets every holiday. You must have noticed." And, Harry had noticed, now that he thought about it. Malfoy held the plate out expectantly, and Harry wondered if he was being offered a piece. It seemed almost a shame to eat it, so pretty was the thing. May I?" "You think I'm going to eat this all by myself? I'd be bouncing off the walls, not to mention the tragedy that would befall this figure." "Well, here's a bright thought. You could share with your friends." "Well, I haven't got—" Malfoy started snippily, then bit his tongue. "Everyone's on holiday," he said, in the end, slow and dangerous, and Harry thought he could handle a little danger right about now. "I'm not. I'm right here." And Malfoy laughed, a bright, cruel bark. "Good gad, Potter, don't be delusional. We're hardly friends." "No?" Harry said, all innocence, and Malfoy glowered at him. "No. Passing acquaintances at most. I'm practically your pet. I've more in common with your owl than anything in Gryffindor robes." "Hedwig's dead," Harry said, evenly enough it even sounded to him like he was finally all right with it. "So am I, as I hear it." It was Christmas, so he let Malfoy's black humour slide. "But you made me this lovely Christmas present." Harry frowned down at his badge, polishing the face with his sleeve so it shone. "And I've been mulling it over for a while, actually, so I think this makes it official now." Malfoy slapped the lid back onto the cloche and sent it flying back to its table. He held a hand out, snapping his fingers insistently. "Give it back, then. I'll destroy it at once." Harry covered the badge, protective. "Absolutely not. It's mine. It was a gift from my friend." "And what if," Malfoy said, with a glittering smile that didn't seem very warm, "I don't want to be friends with you?" "Everyone wants to be friends with me. Why wouldn't you?" "Well, you've just said it. Everyone wants to be friends with you. Depreciated value." "No, everyone wants to be friends with me. I'm rather selective of those I actually let be friends with me. So, really, it doesn't make economic sense for you not to be my friend." Malfoy glowered at him. "Well, I don't want to be friends with you." "Why not?" "Because," Malfoy snapped. "Because we aren't meant to be. You had your chance 7 years back. 14. 14 years back. So just accept it and stop trying. It's rather pathetic, especially for a man of your years." Harry let his head flop back against the divan's plush cushioning. Malfoy really had a deft hand when it came to conjuring furniture, even if his colour palette left something to be desired. Dunno if it's escaped your attention, but I've kind of got a thing about hopeless causes. And I don't really like being told I can't do something, especially not when I want to. He shrugged. And who decides whether or not something's meant to be? You aren't meant to live to see 26 either, but I intend to do something about that as well. Malfoy's neck and ears were flushing now. He went all pink and flustered when he got emotional, which made it difficult for him to hide when something was getting under his skin. It was unfortunate for Malfoy, but fortunate for Harry. Now they could both be open books the other could read with ease. I'm not your friend, Potter, and I don't want to be. Delude yourself if it pleases you, but don't expect the same from me. And Harry was all right with that. Nothing with Malfoy was ever easy, but that was what made it worthwhile. He thought of Ron and Hermione, their insistence he was wasting his time, that Malfoy didn't deserve these efforts, but it was, Harry understood on some level, not entirely about Malfoy. It was a bit about Harry, too. About his own wants and needs and desires. What he sought out of life, what he thought was worthwhile. He wasn't wasting his time with Malfoy any more than he was wasting his time practicing new Quidditch maneuvers. Nothing good or fun was ever all that easy, and that was what made them worth it, wasn't it? When you looked down at your works, saw achievement, and felt pride thrumming warm and solid in your chest. Wouldn't dream of it, Draco, Harry said with a smile that only grew wider when Draco rolled his eyes with a disgusted scoff and reached once more for his book on wandless magic.